Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled today because we're about to dive into and honestly untangle one of history's most famously complex and dramatic family trees. We are looking at the Kuru Dynasty. This is the central lineage of the great Indian epic, the Mahabharata. If you love deep genealogical mysteries, the ones packed with twists of fate, intense rivalries, and deeply buried royal secrets, well, you're absolutely going to love this. Just think about this for a second. How did one single family's tangled web of secrets, vows, and divine interventions trigger the greatest war in all of Indian mythology? I really want us to look at this lineage not just as, a dusty list of names, but as this massive, high-stakes mystery of survival and duty. Every single branch on this tree tells a story of a family desperately trying to keep its bloodline alive, and it all leads directly up to the devastating Kurukshetra war. Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll be moving chronologically through the generations. First up, the roots of the Kuru Dynasty, then Niyoga and saving the lineage. After that, we'll hit the fathers of the Great War, divine heirs and secret sons, and finally, the final descendants. Now, to make this sprawling family tree a bit easier to navigate, we're going to use a strict color code throughout the explainer. Keep this visual key in the back of your mind. Blue represents the males, and red represents the females. Later on, when the family inevitably splits into two rival factions, we'll use green for the Pandavas and yellow for the Kauravas. Having this visual anchor is going to help you easily spot allegiances as all the drama unfolds. All right, part one, roots of the Kuru Dynasty. So our story really kicks off with King Shantanu. His first marriage is actually to the river goddess Ganga, and together they produce a mighty son named Devavrata, who we'll later know as Bhishma. Well, fast forward a bit, and King Shantanu falls deeply, madly in love with a fisherwoman named Satyavati. But there's a catch. Satyavati's father demands that only her future sons can inherit the throne. To allow his father to marry the woman he loves, Bhishma makes this radical, life-altering choice. He takes a terrible vow of lifelong celibacy, completely renouncing his claim to the throne. It's an incredible sacrifice, right? But it paves the way for Satyavati to marry the king, and they end up having two sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. But almost immediately, the family hits a massive succession crisis. Chitrangada is killed young in battle. So his younger brother Vichitravirya takes the throne and marries two princesses, Ambika and Ambalika. But then tragedy strikes again. Vichitravirya dies of sickness before having any children. Think about where this leaves them. With Bhishma sworn to celibacy and the king dead, the royal bloodline is literally on the verge of snapping entirely. Which brings us to part two, Niyoga, saving the lineage. I want you to just pause and ponder this for a moment. How on earth does a dynasty survive when it hits a seemingly impossible biological roadblock? The king is dead, and the only other male in the entire family has sworn a holy vow to never have children. So what do you do? Well, the answer lies in an ancient practice called Niyoga. This was a tradition where a designated, highly respected close relative would be called upon to father children on behalf of a deceased man, purely to continue the royal lineage. Enter Queen Satyavati. Acting as a true master of realpolitik, she reveals a massive secret. Long before she married the king, she had an illegitimate son with a wandering sage, and that son, it's Vyasa. Yes, the great sage and the literal author of the epic itself. Satyavati commands Vyasa to step in and perform Niyoga with her deceased son's widows. Now, what's extremely fascinating here is how the mother's psychological reactions to the sage Vyasa directly dictated the physical traits and the ultimate destinies of the next generation. See, Vyasa was this wild, grim-looking ascetic fresh from the forest. When he approached the first queen, Ambika, she was so absolutely terrified that she squeezed her eyes shut. As a direct result, her son, Dhritarashtra, was born blind. When he approached the second queen, Ambalika, she turned completely pale with fright, so her son, Pandu, was born pale and cursed. Finally, a substitute maid met Vyasa. She was perfectly calm and respectful, completely fearless. And her son, Vidura, was born perfectly healthy and incredibly wise. Moving on to part three, Fathers of the Great War. Let's look at the stark contrast between our rival patriarchs here. Dhritarashtra was the eldest, sure, but his blindness technically disqualified him from inheriting the throne according to the rules of the time. So the crown passes right over him to his younger brother, Pandu. But, and there's always a but, Pandu is later cursed by a sage to die if he ever tries to father children. This forces him to retreat to the forest, which leaves the blind Dhritarashtra to assume the throne after all. Talk about a recipe for a bitter, lingering succession dispute. Dhritarashtra and his wife Gandhari go on to have exactly 100 sons. Meanwhile, Pandu's wives, Kunti and Madri, have to use divine mantras to summon actual gods to father their 5 sons. This insane disparity sets the exact stage for a massive numerical mismatch in the coming war. That brings us to part 4, divine heirs and secret sons. Thinking back to our color coding, the yellow branch represents those 100 Kauravas, led by the eldest Duryodhana. But wait, look closely. Notice the secret yellow son? Yuyutsu. Born to Dhritarashtra through a maid, Yuyutsu adds this totally fascinating hidden layer of drama to the family tree. Why? Because he is the only Kaurava who eventually defects and fights against his own 100 brothers? No way, right? Over on the other side, we have the green branch, the 5 Pandavas. Yudhishthira, Bhima, and Arjuna are born to Kunti through the gods of justice, wind, and storm. Then you have the green twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, born to Madri through the divine twin horsemen, the Ashwins. But amidst all this sprawling royal lineage, the sources highlight a truly tragic figure, and that is Karna. He is widely considered the epic's unsung, subaltern hero. His entire life was just this constant, brutal struggle against the cruel destiny of his birth. He faced intense class discrimination and was rejected from the very society he was quite literally born to rule. So here is the absolutely crucial point. Karna is actually the eldest Pandava. Long before marrying Pandu, Queen Kunti was testing out her divine mantra and accidentally summoned the sun god, Surya. Karna was born out of wedlock, arriving with divine golden armor. Panicked, Kunti abandoned him in a river. He was eventually found and lovingly raised by a lowly charioteer. Because his true royal divine lineage is kept a total secret, he's mocked his whole life as just a low-born charioteer's son. And the irony here is devastating. His fierce loyalty to the one man who finally respects him, Duryodhana, forces him to fight a brutal war against his own biological brothers. Finally, Part 5, the final descendants. Let's walk down the timeline of this family tree because it puts everything into perspective. We started at the top with this massive, wide canopy of 100 Kauravas and 5 Pandavas, plus all their various wives and children. But the war acts like a brutal funnel. Look at how aggressively the line of succession narrows, from King Shantanu to Pandu down to the great warrior Arjuna. Arjuna's son Abhimanyu fights valiantly but tragically dies in the war. He leaves his unborn son, Parikshit, in his widow's womb. Parikshit, against literally all odds, survives to eventually father Janamejaya. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the devastating cost of the Mahabharata. The number 1. Out of an absolutely massive dynasty featuring over 100 princes, mighty warriors, and divine heirs, only one single heir from that warring generation, the infant Parikshit, survives to continue the Kuru lineage and actually rule Hastinapura. This ancient quote perfectly captures the sheer tragedy of the epic. All the children of the Pandavas perished in the war, and Parikshit extended the almost extinct race of Bharatas. It's chilling. The family fought so hard for the throne. They clung to vows, organized secret divine births, and played these massive, high-stakes political games. And in doing so, they almost completely annihilated their own existence. Which leaves us with one final lingering question. Was the survival of the Kuru Dynasty really worth the almost complete annihilation of its own family tree? It's a lot to process, and it leaves us to deeply ponder the tragic cost of duty, ambition, and the extreme lengths a family will go to for a crown. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this incredible lineage. I really hope mapping it out like this has made the epic history of the Kuru Dynasty clear,